Welcome to the closing panel of Blue Info Summit. In this panel, we have the privilege to welcome Ariel Troisi, the president of IOC, and Craig McLean, representative of the United States IOC, and also Paula Marques, the leader of Skipper and Wool. Thank you so much for coming. And Ariel has all in the panel a very strong curriculum, and he will allow me to summarize as being the president of IOC, and that is a huge honor. So, and with that, I would ask Ariel to give us a first remark on how important it is for the Ocean Decade cooperation.
Okay, thank you very much, Miguel, and thank you for this opportunity to share some thoughts with the group. So the first question is, why is this decade we have just started, this decade of ocean science for sustainable development, so important? So if you allow me for a second, I chose a very special background, virtual background for me. Yeah, I'll just move around and see, this is what they call a spillhouse projection. So we have the ocean surrounded by Earth. That's why this decade is so important. Because we depend on the ocean. And when you look around, I'm looking at my notes, and you go to the UN websites, and you find out that in 2021, you find 12 different decades. So why this one will be different or should be different? Because the ocean is our main life support system. When you go to the decades, and this, if I may share with this group how this was born. About 6 years ago, there was a meeting, a board of officers of IOC, and in Denmark. There was this former executive secretary who mentioned, you know, we are this close to be 50 years from the decade of ocean exploration. That was 1970 to 1980. And we all pictured, okay, 1970 plus 50, 1920, 20 plus 10 is 2030, 2030 agenda. We've already done exploration. We've already gone through observation. We are already predicting. What we need is to move forward and do something different and go for sustainable development. Go for what the mission is of this decade. And I see in this panel we have a Craig McLean, besides being representative of the US and have a very distinguished position within NOAA. He is also a member of the executive planning group, and they worked really hard through almost 2.5 years to build up the implementation plan. And when you look at the vision of this decade, is the science we need for the ocean we want, with one mission: to have a transformative ocean science solutions for sustainable development and connecting people with the ocean. And it revolves around 7 societal outcomes, or 7 outcomes. It started as societal outcomes, then it turned into 7 outcomes, 10 challenges that will certainly change throughout the decades, because this is something that's alive. And we have 3 objectives, clear objectives: identify required knowledge for sustainable development, build capacity and generate comprehensive knowledge and understanding of the ocean, and increase the use of ocean knowledge and understanding, and develop the capacity to contribute to sustainable development. And with that, we are not going to solve the problems and the challenges the ocean is facing. We will just set an appropriate foundation for the future. And that's why, and I will come back to this at the end of my few minutes, we'll talk about the early career ocean professionals. Because as I heard Craig said many times, we've started this, but there's someone else who's going to drive this decade. And the guys today at school are the ones who will be in a position to be the early career professionals by the end of the decade. And when I say ocean professionals, I'm not talking about oceanographers, Because something that we've learned throughout the discussions when building this decade concept was that we need to integrate all dimensions of knowledge, all dimensions of the ocean, natural sciences, social sciences, human sciences, everything. Everything is connected. So when we think about this decade, we know how we are. We know that the ocean's health is showing signs that call for our attention, call for our action, and we need to reach 10 years from now to an ocean that it's clean, that it's healthy, that it's productive, that can be predicted, that it's safe for coastal populations, but also for offshore activities, that it's accessible in terms of data, information, and knowledge. It's inspiring. So people realize how connected we are to the ocean and the services the ocean is providing us. So that you can go through the implementation plan and you will find that we have ocean challenges addressing pollution and marine debris, ecosystem protection and restoration, food security and sustainable development of fisheries, aquaculture, economic development. When we look at the ocean, we tend to forget that we use the ocean for transportation. A few months ago, people realized that there was a huge container ship that, because of a nautical incident, blocked the Suez Canal. And you heard that on the news, and people would say, you know what, this is blocking international commerce. And every day the channel is blocked, we are losing $9 billion US. That's part of the ocean. The impact of the COVID pandemic in terms of transportation, in terms of tourism, has affected us all, but also has affected us in our ability to observe the ocean. And without being able to observe the ocean properly, our forecasts were affected. So everything is connected. So that brings us to also the ocean climate nexus, multi-hazards warnings, because we have several early warning systems. And for that, we need observations. And that's for sustained ocean observations. Throughout this decade, one of the challenges is to have a digital map of the ocean in its 4 dimensions. When I mention 4 dimensions, it's because we have, in this mapping, it's not just having the depth and the position, but we also need to see that picture in time. We need to have the movie in 4 dimensions. For that, we need to develop capacity. And something that is critical and is also foundational as developing capacity, we need to engage with the society at large, because we need social and behavioral barriers to change. And just for argument's sake, you were discussing in the previous panel about plastics and microplastic. That's not a scientific issue, that is a societal issue, right? So those concepts come into the decade. I would say 50 years ago, there was an article by this specialist, Alvin Weinberg. He said that inherent uncertainties surrounding complex and even socially divisive problems led to questions being asked of science that science could not respond. And he developed a concept of transscience that meant the scientific efforts to respond, to answer questions that transcended science. So we were able as a society to develop experts for the affirmative and experts for the negative. And under these familiar conditions, science clearly must be doing something other than simply reporting upon well-established cause-effect observations in nature. A couple of decades later, there was this concept of post-normal science, where decisions are urgent, uncertainties and stakes are high, and values may be in dispute. So you can apply that to the ocean. Yeah, that's a possibility. So going back in time with this flashbacks and coming forward, Lord Kelvin said that when you can measure something about what you are speaking, that means that, and you can express it in numbers, you know something about it. Otherwise, your knowledge about that something is meager or it's unsatisfactory. But if we start describing something with numbers, that also is a claim about the correspondence between an idea and the material world. And what if those numbers have no knowable relationship to reality because they're an abstraction? I mean, that's a fallacy, that misplaced concreteness when we take abstractions as concrete facts. So that's the responsibility now of science. Science has been really good in diagnosing what's happening. And I'm talking now about the ocean science in general. Now we need to move into something transformative and provide responses to society. And you will find different points of view, like the environment is favorable to humanity and will help itself, or environment is a very delicate and unstable balance, so we have to be very careful. Others would say this uncertainty about cause and effects. And then you will find those who says, okay, now we have to look, we have some non-negotiables and a system of compensations. So we need to decide collectively, how are we going to move forward? Because we are putting into risk this, as I said, our life support system. So throughout the decade, we will be expanding our outreach and we will reach agriculture, construction, commercial and recreational fishing, insurance and reinsurance, legislation, manufacturing, retail trade, mining, public safety, tourism and recreation, transport and warehousing, utilities, zoos and aquaria. As you see, we're touching on everything. A recent publication, the called Blue Papers, stemming out of the high-level ocean panel, was addressing, for example, sustainability and benefits, and based on only 4 ocean-based interventions: conserving and restoring mangrove habitats, scaling up offshore wind production, decarbonizing the international shipping sector, and increasing the production of sustainably sourced ocean-based proteins. They were able to understand the benefits in terms of health, environmental, ecological, economic, and social benefits versus costs to business, to governments, to households. You know these numbers as well as I do. When you take the gross domestic product of the ocean, it would be the 7th largest world economy. Well, according to this analysis made by the high-level ocean panel and the experts they called for this particular paper, with investments between 2020 and 2050 between 2 and 3.7 trillion US dollars, the average net benefit would be 8.2 to 20, almost 23 trillion US dollars. That means a return of investment with a benefit to cost ratio between 3 to 1 up to 12 to 1. So we're only talking about sustainable ocean economy, the value of the ocean, the value of what we need to do in order to observe, generate the knowledge, and support decision-making, and support the industry, and support technological developments. Those are the numbers we must look at. So how easy it's to get involved in the decade. The decade is not only the UN decade, it's not the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission decade, it's our decade, all of us. So we all need to engage. There was a call for actions, the first call for actions that closed in January this year. And Craig, he's smiling, he worked really hard with the IOC Secretariat, analyzing more than 200 proposals. And a few weeks ago, World Ocean Day, there was an announcement of the first set of actions that were endorsed. So we had 28 programs addressing multiple challenges of the decade, including capacity development, with a strong focus on observations on sustainable ocean economy and ocean climate nexus. And those 28 programs are in addition to 6 UN agencies-led actions that are different. And there will be a further call for actions and projects that will be released August, September this year. And it is a continuous review of the proposals that were received at the level of programs. So there's a feedback with the proponents so they can be included in some networks, for example, or turned into projects. And those are the things we need to achieve what we've said, the ocean we need for the future we want. So basically, we need to use data to drive decision-making. We need to engage in goal-oriented ocean planning. We need de-risking finance and using innovation to mobilize investments. We need to change the way we communicate our narrative, because we need to approach other sectors, other communities. We should take into consideration the problem of land-based pollution and how to modify that. We need to change ocean accounting so that it reflects the true value of the ocean. And fundamentally, and that's the last line of my notes, the early career ocean professionals. Without them, we are lost. And I'll stop by now with my rambling, because I know Craig would like to pitch in with a lot of interesting things, and Paula too. So thank you very much, Miguel, and hand back the floor to you.
Thank you so much, Ariel. I don't know how to describe this fantastic talk you had now, but I would say an epic talk, because I have to thank you. You had a very busy day today, and you made the effort to be here in person, and also being so, in terms of distance so far. Yeah, I think you are in Argentina or in the Americas, and with all your power and energy, you won even some difficulties on the connection, and it was brilliant. So thank you so much, Ariel, for that. And with that, I go to Craig. As I said about Ariel, your curriculum is also so huge, so bright, that I will say only a line. You are the IOC representative for the United States, and that's a strong honor and responsibility. So thank you so much, Craig, for everything you do about the ocean. And we are here to listen to you about the Ocean Decade and how does the US see this moment in life in the world.
Miguel, thank you very much. And Paula as well, thank you. And it's always a pleasure to share any forum with Captain Troisi, and I would respectfully declare him as Chairman Troisi, as he is the chair of the IOC. And he does a masterful job of bringing us forward. 150 countries working together towards this goal. And it warms my heart and just gives me, I sit up taller when I think of this, that the unity of the entire massive countries is behind this. So let me start, if I can, and I will touch on the US views of the decade, which are entirely supportive and very aggressively pursuing the opportunities that I think the global community has routinely looked to the United States to help provide. But if I could start, Miguel, with just a personal reflection, because I have found during the course of this work, and I appreciate Captain Troisi recalling the length of time in the IOC and as we have developed this, I've always kept just a few talismans, if you will, in my vision to remind me where we're going. And it's my grandchildren. I recognize, and I know in your children, you see the same thing, Miguel and Paula. We look at these young people, and they are very young. I contemplate the world that they're going to grow into. Not necessarily the world they're going to grow up in, but the world they're going to grow into. And it will break my heart if we today, who have the opportunity to provide some influence on the direction that our society takes in order to preserve the services that Ariel Troisi just discreetly described for us, that the value of what the ocean system provides to humanity, if we disrupt that, and if we stay on the course we're on, we will disrupt that. What will that leave for our grandchildren? Quite possibly, people could ask the same question of what will it leave for your children? But I'm thinking in the trend and the tendency and the direction that we go in, this is a moment that we can look to ourselves and say, I am responsible and you are responsible. We are all responsible for doing something different in the way that we've been conducting ourselves and executing our human economies, plural. There are developed economies, there are developing economies, and there are economies that are really in need of assistance and help. And all of this counts. And that's what the decade is trying to incorporate. But if I look to the future that I want for my grandchildren, we have defined that in the strategy of the UN decade. Let me once again travel in time for a moment. I'll go back to the 1970s. I was a young teenager at the time. I had already read a publication that had been in print for over a decade, and it was Rachel Carson's the sea around us. But I, like so many other young minds, I was thrilled with the undersea world of Jacques Cousteau, the silent world, each of his publications, episodes, a marvelous poet of many languages who could describe the elegance and the mystery and the wonder of the ocean, but also the concern for the ocean. Cousteau, Rachel Carson, other speakers, writers, filmmakers brought to us the awareness of the ocean. And from that came a decade through the 70s of laws in many countries to protect the air, to protect the water, the ocean, and to cause humans to stop doing things that were damaging to that environment. I think we then got a little comfortable and maybe a little bit lazy because we stopped paying as much attention to that globally as we did during that epical era of the 70s and such, that really brought some focus to the environment. But we're here now realizing that we have paid too little attention to the effects that we humans have in our wake as we make progress economically, developmentally. As we make our way through the ocean, we're not looking at what we're leaving behind. We are practicing more of a linear economy where we produce that which we want and we discard everything that we don't need from that production effort. We need to change that and take it about and make it into a circular economy where the byproducts of that which we seek to achieve are they themselves beneficial and not harming of the earth or not harming of the environment. So this circular economy is something that we also look to the decade in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, which effectively translate in summary, a circular economy that does good for the environment, good for humanity, and really creates an opportunity for all people to thrive and increase or benefit their position. So if we look at what the decade holds in its promise, we know the problems. Your seminar has discussed so many of them during the course of the day's events. We don't need to recount them. It's what do we do about it? I would offer another observation and then describe what the United States is in a position to do. We in the science community are very comfortable talking to other scientists. When we start to break out of that branch and start to communicate with the citizens who will be impacted by the science, and as Chairman Troisi said, the science we need for the ocean we want, we need to understand, as he did mention as well, and I support, the need for the social science engagement to understand from communities, people who are national leaders, people who are community leaders, individuals, what is it that you desire? What do you want? How can we help explain through science how to get to a better position than where we are, or how to protect the ocean more than we are today? Any one of those areas. We need to engage, and we need to, as we have been using the term, co-design. That came up today as well. As we co-design, we have to make sure that we're not thinking for the citizen instead of asking the citizen. We have the tendency in the science community to self-determine what's needed. And this is where I'll go to my friend and colleague Miguel Marx, where I have found the value in seeing the ability to translate between government language, scientific language, and private sector language. Some people describe this as the triple helix. My friend Michael Jones out in San Diego with the Alliance and the Blue Technology, the Maritime Alliance, excuse me, the TMA. The triple helix, government, academia, and commercial sector. The triple helix idea brings to mind the chemical model we're all familiar with. But what is missing and what is necessary is the enzyme. And that is the ability to translate between the parties, the language, the expectations, the methods of doing work. When I sit down with a startup who's interested in doing ocean work, and I explain to them the pace and tempo of government, they're out the door very quickly because startups do not work at the pace and tempo of a public-run government where the citizens have to agree on how much money to spend each year and the like. It's just a different timescale. But by having the enzyme function to help those three different parties work better together is key. And that's what I really encourage, and I appreciate the Blue Info session here, because I know that's what we're focusing on, and I know that that's what Miguel has brought, that's what Paula has brought, and I think that's very helpful to us. So now let me just touch on this for the United States interest in the UN decade. I'll go back to, and I did find the report from the International Decade of Ocean Exploration. And the genesis of this decade was that the President of the United States declared that we should allocate funds in the US Treasury in order to provide for such. And that idea was brought up to and embraced by the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission. We're at a situation here now where we have in the Biden administration the commitment to the success of the decade and to be committed to generating the resources that demonstrate the resolve to achieve the objectives of the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. We have the support of our president. And we have further the technological, the academic, the governmental, the private sector, the philanthropic communities that are really growing into this opportunity with high enthusiasm, because we all know the condition of the world and the world ocean. We know of the climate crisis that we need to address, and we need to do it aggressively and with purpose, and that the ocean is at the center of so much of this. As the climate special envoy, John Kerry, whom many of you are familiar with, has often said, if you get oceans, you get climate. And if you get climate, you get oceans. The two are inextricably linked. And that is, to me, also why the decade is so important. So in the United States, we have organized every federal agency that has anything to do with oceans, and there are 17 of them. And we meet routinely to plan what we're going to be able to do to execute the decade programs. And soon, as we conduct the further review, the decade projects. Programs are large scale, large ocean basin. Projects are smaller in size, but that's the key to the decade. Everyone counts. Every geography counts. Every ocean basin or sub-basin, small region and bay, it all counts. And we need to be scaled to address these activities and opportunities at each of those scales. We established a U.S. committee, as many other countries have done, in order to help guide the people who have ideas and they want to propose those ideas. We've gone to our National Academies of Science and impaneled our Ocean Studies Board to serve as that U.S. committee. To me, the wisdom of doing this was that the National Academies also connect with the Academies of Engineering, Academy of Medicine, and you start to look at the multiple disciplines that are covered. There are additional networks through this academy structure that allows the keen idea of an ocean idea to be parlayed and translated to other communities where their ideas can join in. So it's a small cycle of social science engagement and diversity of thought engagement, and it's working very, very well. We have now some 70 organizations that have joined as Nexus organizations to the decade. We have about 12.5 philanthropies that are working actively to identify the opportunities, and those 17 agencies working furtively. So we plan to be very active participants in this. And the last two things I want to mention. One is, as I'll say, Captain Troisi, as we're both fellow mariners, when Captain Troisi uses the Spillhouse map behind him, the one piece that is not having to be distorted in an appropriate projection in terms of extrapolating the longitude or the latitude is Africa. Africa appears at the center of the Spillhouse map. If we look at the ocean services that are being provided to the people of Africa, they are perhaps per capita fewer in number in terms of capacity development and availability. That's something else that the decade really stands for, is building capacity in those places that are remote. Some of the Pacific Island states are similarly needing assistance in capacity development. We have to stay focused on that. Last word on the early career professionals. We want these people involved not just because they're young, but because they're smart. And they were trained differently than we were trained. They are multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, creative in their thought, and very quick to find solutions, where I think more traditional training, like I might have had, keeps us bound to our limited traditional areas of thought. So bring those early career professionals into your conversation, bring them into even leadership positions, guide them on your way through, as I am, as I start to approach my contemplation of when I retire. I want to make sure that I've got not just my next replacement here, but my next generation ready to come on up and replace us and do some creative thinking. Because what was the average age of the people in the control room when the Apollo set down on the moon. You can think about that. The average age was 28. And what do we do today in our challenge for 28-year-old technical people or any type of profession? I hope they're not sitting in the corner making a PowerPoint presentation. I hope they're able to contribute the best of their thoughts. Let them contribute those thoughts to the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Craig. Ariel put the talk in a very, very high level, and you more than coped that. So, and because of that, and because of your fantastic contribution, I will change a little bit what we have managed to agree on, and I will ask Paula a little question because she's an international expert on everything it is related with learning, with people, with engaging. So Paula, just some remarks on that, because what Craig says and also Ariel said also touch on what you do.
Yes, and thank you. And thank you, Ariel, and thank you for Craig for this sharing. And of course, we're living super challenging times. And if there's a competence that we should put on humans right now, it's this ability of learn. And we all said, you know, one of the things that we have discovered is that we don't control and we don't know. We now say, I don't know. And this is super important to say, I don't know. Because the moment I say, I don't know, I'm starting my willing to learn. And that's a point. We have now people that in our boards of companies that are saying, I really don't know what's going on, or I need help. And we realize that not just we don't control, that we don't know. And the third learning for me, these challenging times we're living, is that we acknowledge what Ariel was mentioning before, is that we live in a very complex system. We are all connected. We can't just put our hands off because we will be different. We'll be different beings. So this is a very complex system, and we live in several complex systems. And we need to understand, because everything is connected. And as Craig said, everyone counts. Everybody counts. You can't just dispose some people outside our system. And this systemic vision about the world brings, of course, a lot of challenges for learning. And one of the things that we need to teach people is this systemic vision, is this idea of seeing all big picture and not just the pieces. We are used to be super specialized in our hub, in our area. We are good on doing that, but we need people that see the big picture, to see the big world and see that we are facing a big problem. And these complex problems, by definition, cannot be solved just with 1, 2, or 3 clever minds. We need everybody at the table. We need to seat everybody at the table. We need all the sciences, as Craig was mentioning, but not just sciences. Also, people that doesn't know anything about science. We need people that make questions, that have this critical thinking. And so the challenge for schools, it's very tough. A challenge for creating not just the world we want, but what types. Sometimes we think about what is the world that I'm going to leave to our kids. But we have to think, what type of kids are we living in order to rule that world? We have to think about training people right now in order to be the adults who want us, not just this idea of just handle it the world. We need also to work on in a very early stages. So learning and it has to start with our kids, but also with executives, people that actually can change the course of the things, people that have power. And we have to do it, of course, in a very rush, because as we know and we acknowledge, complex problems need everybody at the table. It's not easy to have everybody at the table because it rights a lot of diversity. It's very complex to deal with all these people speaking. It's very easy just to be within our homes. But then we have 2 big things. We have creativity. We have breakthrough ideas when we just mingle all these things, all these people, unexpected people speaking about all the things. And then we have something that is resilient ecosystems. You know, Darwin said, and also a lot of anthropologists said, and Claude Lévi-Strauss, they did the same circumnavigation around the world, and they conclude the same thing. when we have more diverse people seated at the table, we have more resilient ecosystems, and we need to have that diversity also here. And so for me, it's a huge, huge challenge, not just for business schools and universities, but it's a huge, a very huge challenge in terms of learning. And it's the right time to do it, because we are finally admitting that we don't know, and that we should use that in our favor. If you don't know, we can stop learning.
Thank you, Paula, to bring us to the table. Not knowing is the start to start knowing. So that is fundamental. And I would like also to share a bit of what happened today, particularly on the topic that Craig addressed, because there is an unbalanced world in terms of power to study, power to have time to think in changing. And we have, for instance, the experience of Africa here. Africa wants to get together as a community. So there are a lot of leaders in Africa that thinking on a kind of Mercosur for Africa or EU for Africa. That thoughts are in place. And I will ask to Ariel and to Craig, how can we help these kind of goodwill movements to a better future for the world, because we need that to get Africa on board and also to give the capacity. So Ariel, I don't know if you want to add something.
As a matter of fact, we have great scientists in Africa, and we have great institutions and important projects being carried out there. But sometimes we need to work in other dimensions, because we need to project and find together with our African colleagues where are the priorities, where should be our next steps. And some things come straight to my mind directly, just coastal hazards, marine spatial planning, ocean and climate prediction. Those are things that we need to master, that we need to understand, and we need to translate, as Craig was saying, in the different languages our community as a whole has. Not talking peer-to-peer, but translating all this. Let me give you an example that I believe it's something that we should do. You know, when you got the waves coming to the shore, they normally don't come perpendicular. They have an angle. So you have a current that goes along the coast, and then a current that comes back, because the energy has to return somewhere and does not disappear when the wave breaks. So it goes back into the sea. And in English terms, we have the rip currents. So you have cells, circulation cells. Well, an oceanographer knows that. A tourist in a beach, the swimmer, probably not. And it's very often that we find out during summertime that a swimmer drowned in one of our beaches. The problem is we could not breach this ocean literacy barrier. That's one thing we need to achieve. Worldwide, it applies also to Africa. It's this, let's put it this way. Some may consider that we can fall in a sort of post-truth condition, where personal beliefs or impressions are more important than reality or objective facts. And that is possible because of some sort of science illiteracy. We need to help them with that. We need to help ourselves with that. It's not only for Africa. And let me add, because Craig was pointing out very clearly to Africa, we have some other issues like small island developing states. And then you say, if we are starting to open our net, how are we going to do this? Well, basically, we need to sit down with every stakeholder and try to define priorities, because we will not be able to address everything at the same time. We will have to start by addressing these priorities according to the region, according to the particular groups. That would be my initial response.
Thank you, Ariel. Craig, the same question, but I would add on two more regions, big regions, because at lunchtime here in Portugal, we have a fantastic panel that aim to create a bridge in between India, European Union, and the United States of America. And we have a lot of interesting people from India sharing their thoughts. So what is the US thinking on this? And also in the previous panel, we had the excellent example and case study of Ceará, with the condition that Ceará has put as a priority the ocean, and they have roadmaps, and they have data scientists looking carefully to that. So how we can engage more with these two important regions of the globe, Latin America, India, and also Africa?
I think the key to appropriate engagement is, as Ariel has said, we have to understand what the challenge is, and you really can only learn that by talking to the people who live in the region, the local people. Now, it's one thing for us to say that we want to measure the effects of the Indian Ocean throughput in order to understand what the weather forecast in Europe is going to be 3 weeks from now. Well, that's fine. We understand that there are physical processes that we could measure. But when we start talking about enhancing a sustainable ocean economy or sustainable development and how that affects the oceans, we have to really understand what the society, what the community really needs. So that local level of understanding is not something we do by mail correspondence, right? We don't send a letter and just hope for an answer. We have to engage. And I think the best description of capacity development that I ever heard was from a gentleman from South Africa. And we were at a climate meeting that was sponsored by the Global Climate Change Research Program. And this gentleman offered the view that you can't just drop in, make an assessment, leave a few things behind, and then go back home. You have to make the committed and determined embodiment of your presence. And I think we do that by joined science programs, as we have in the Indian Ocean, as we do with South America, many other parts of the world, parts of Asia, part of the lesser developed components of Asia. And these have to be sustained over years in order to really have the effect, have the developmental outcomes that we're all looking for. And we're doing that through the IOC, the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, with the African core of the IOC. And we're trying to pair up nations who have similar interests in the science with, for example, those countries that are developing. And what I'm very proud to see is the ability of multiple African nations to be generating their own capacity in ocean science. We're really starting to see a turn. And I think that the All-Atlantic Research Forum, which started with the Galway Statement, the European Union, Canada, and the United States, then inspired the Belém Statement, and that then brought in Brazil and South Africa, and now other countries are joining from the west coast of Africa, the east coast of South America, and now we look about, and now we have the All-Atlantic Ocean Research Forum. So people get to know each other, they make acquaintances at the technical level, then they start to build long-term relationships, and that's how it has worked in many other places. Now, the Pacific Islands, I think there's an urgency in some of the Pacific Island territories because of sea level rise and inundation, where very concerned leaders are recognizing that their lives are going to be very different with a higher sea level much sooner than many other coastal areas around the globe. So these are important subjects. We need to be dealing with them. And I think having the entire globe focused on ocean issues is a way to really advance this through the course of the next 10 years.
Thank you so much, Craig. So this has been fantastic. I will ask a last remark from you, and then I will ask Paula to close this session, and I will start with Ariel. What can we expect for the next months in terms of little outcomes of the decade or activities? Because, well, with the pandemic, there was a little disruption here. Everything was turned to be virtual, but it was a good thing. Nothing stopped. And in some areas, also increase the speed. But what can we expect for the next months in terms of activities or outcomes of the decade?
Well, what we can expect, and we very much look forward, as I mentioned, there will be out a new call for actions, decade actions for endorsement. Now at the level, you will find out that we started at the highest level, that was the programs and contributions. And now we are going into the level of projects that contribute to address the challenges or achieve the outcomes of the decade. That will come in the next couple of months. They will come out, and then in that process, we will start engaging with proponents and stakeholders and trying to build networks so we can connect people and move forward, push this agenda, this common agenda we have on the ocean. That's what we can expect, and I'm very much looking forward to the first results. We're not starting from scratch. We are just trying to find out how to connect people and ideas and initiatives. And we are having, as we speak, we are having in several regions groups that have been formed in order to discuss and analyze how they are going to move forward as a region for the decade. And then we are having national coordinating units for the decade being developed. So that's what we are having right now. We're moving in the right direction. We are engaging with other stakeholders. We're engaging with philanthropists. We're engaging with society at large. That is what's coming. So I'm very confident that we will leave something really good for Craig's grandchildren. But as Paula said, we're also working in ocean literacy, trying to educate our children in order to be appropriate inheritors of that value.
Thank you so much, Ariel. Your final remarks reminds me that you are a kind of shaping the structure to go forward with the decade, and that reminds me your first talk with the changing shape of the planet. So thank you so much, Ariel, for that. And Craig, my question to you is slightly similar, but as we have been watching in the news, there is some changing in the United States way of seeing the future and partnership in the future. Can you elaborate on that a little bit as a final remark? What can we expect in the future of future position on the US in terms of oceans and cooperation?
Well, Miguel, as you mentioned, it's quite easily to detect a change in the national policy from the United States. And it starts with the views of the president as he came in with his agenda, recognizing a climate crisis. I think for the previous 4 years, we have been suppressing the reality of climate change, perhaps simply because people didn't know, understand, or care for what policy choices must be made in order to address climate change. But we see that it's happening as a reality now. And the president came in with an ambitious agenda to the point that we're seeing budget requests, money for science across all federal agencies in the United States, which is based on leveraging and working with international partners. So I think we see a very, very different outlook in order to, number one, characterize the view of the United States as we relate to ocean science and science writ large, and also the mechanism of how we're going to undertake this. So we are seeing, I think, an awakening and a renewal of where the United States might more traditionally have been looked to have returned to that position, but not returning to yesterday's challenges, looking at the challenges we see in front of us. And I'm very proud to be part of the effort. We have enhanced so many levels of activity in just a few months of this new administration. Just earlier today, I was able to give my regards to our newly sworn in administrator or head of NOAA, the nation's ocean agency in the United States, our colleague and a former representative of the United States to the IOC, and that's Dr. Rick Spinrad. And the optimism is flowing all the way around. So my closing comment would be that it's not just about the United States, it's about every country, it's about all of us. but maybe we look forward to this decade and find the results that today we cannot even dream of. Let's be inspiration oriented, let's be bold, think big, and go big. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Craig. Thank you so much for this inspiring remark. And before I ask Paula to conclude, I have to thank you and also to, again, call the attention to ask for more voluntary commitments under the SDG 14. It's not difficult to submit them. I can share my experience because we decided to offer to the decade our work in terms of our quantitative reports. The name is Burji, you know, that little flags that signalized what is going on, and that is the idea. Little flag that signalized flags, that flag is the trends, and we did that for the next 10 years, that commitment. So with this, and you can obtain that report in our site, in this event site. And as you know, it photographs the numbers on 2020, which overall are not good. It is the pandemic, but there are some good news there, and we must take advantage of this difficulty. And if we can do the recovery in a transformational way, maybe we would get positive things of this. That is what this Burji report shares about. And with this, Paula, and thank you, Paula, for allowing me to lead the Blue Info project in the company you lead, that is Skipper and Wool. Thank you so much, Paula.
Oh, you're welcome. It's an honor for me to close this summit, to close this beautiful event. And just two final remarks, just to wrapping up. The first one is, we don't know what the future will bring us, but one thing is for sure. We know that the future will happen in the intersection of sciences, of not sciences and scientists, of people, of cultures, of countries. It will happen on the edges, in the interscience of things. It's not just technology that are merging and making this exponential curve of transformation that now everybody knows what is linear versus exponential because of the pandemic. But this is not just a mathematical thing. It's also something that impacts our life. So we have to be very aware of this intersection, of this connectedness, of people, of ideas, of sciences, of disciplines, and not just being in our own paths. And the second one, and the final one, I think we should all think about the path that brought us here. Let's not just forget why this is happening, why we are having this great summit today, this conversation, this sharing. Why on earth we, a very fragile creature, a very fragile being, this mystery that Darwin said, how on earth we creatures so fragile, we don't have claws, we don't run so fast, our predators could kill us in the first thing. So why on earth did we just get to be the first species that rule this world? We can do whatever we want at this stage. We can do everything we want. Some things are good and some of the things are not so good. So when we can do everything, we should think about what we actually want to do, what we actually want to become. And so Darwin thought about this like a mystery. Okay, this is a mystery. Why on earth this fragile creature managed to rule the world in this manner? And he had two theories. The one, of course, it's technology. We have these great brains. We just dream about things. A mammal that believes that he can fly or that adds things to the nature. Of course, technology helps us to run faster, to build clothes, to build shelters. This is all technology that we built since the swirling eggs. We are much better than our ancestors. But the second thing, the second theory of Darwin is that, I want to close with that. Darwin said there's something about humans that is not equal to the other species. It is, we are masters of cooperation. We are champions in cooperation, in collaboration. And we compete with bees, with ants, with termites. but in a different level, you know, because bees and termites, they are biological robots. They do what the nature tells them to do. And what is? Just cooperate within your blood, cooperate within your DNA. Don't cooperate with the other DNAs or bloods. We are the only ones that actually have the courage to sacrifice ourselves in order to cooperate with outside our DNA and outside our blood. And so it's this magic that Darwin called the human sympathy. It's a kind of a way that we managed to become such a great species in this world. And great power comes with great responsibility. We can change this world. We can actually do big things or bad ones. And so that's why we have to have consciousness about this power. And technology gives this idea of collective intelligence. So today we have bigger weapons in order to collect all the bright ideas around us, not just in our little homes, but around the world. We can have the best people and the best brains to try to find the breakthrough solutions for our complex problems. And so with this hope message that I just thank you, all of you, for your time, for your energy, for your attention. One of the most important things that we have these times, it's our time and our attention. And so just a big thank you for being with us today, and hope to see you all during the next decade.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Ariel. Thank you, all the speakers that have their best for the Blue Info Summit. We see you around. Thank you.